Okay, guys, we're going to look into chapter 13 a little bit more. We started talking about it in the past weeks and watched that documentary about the court case. Chapter 13 is about state courts. There's a couple of key words when you're talking about state courts. Some examples of crimes that might get you sent to state court is going to be assault or public intoxication. Both of those are going to be criminal cases. This next one, divorce, is different than these first two because it is a civil case. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about that. A witness is a person who has seen something that happened to the crime. And a witness can be for the prosecution, the people trying to prove the person is guilty, or it can be for the defense, trying to prove the person is innocent. And then this word deadlocked is especially important. In that documentary we watched, when they were charging the boy Brandon with the murder, I don't know if you remember, but the first jury could not come to a decision. They were deadlocked. So, the state court system. The judicial branch runs the court systems, and the state court system is pretty similar to the federal court system. There are a couple differences in the types of cases they have and the amount of authority they have, but they have similar responsibilities. Their responsibility is to explain the laws, and they have the power to punish people who violate those laws. They hear both criminal and civil cases. State courts only handle cases that deal with state laws. So if you break a federal law, you're going to federal court. If you break a state law, you're most likely going to a state court. And some examples of cases that would get you to a state court are going to be if you break, or if there's a violation of a state constitution. So there was actually a case in New York where in New York it was legal for police officers to randomly stop and search anybody they wanted. It's called stop and frisk. And what happened is that state law ended up getting thrown out because that state law violated the Constitution. So any laws that violate the state constitution could be challenged in state court. They handle criminal cases dealing with state laws contained within one state. So like robbery, assault, drunk driving, those are all cases that would get you sent to state court most likely. And then civil cases within one state. And a civil case is about a broken arrangement, broken agreement, broken contract. Divorce is one example of a civil case. But the important part is they have to be maintained within one state for it to be handled by one state court system. So an example of a civil case would be like if you paid somebody to come and remodel your kitchen, put in brand new cabinets, brand new granite countertops, and they want $1,000 down to start the project. Let's say you give them the money and then they never show up. When you take them to court, that is going to be for a civil case. So, state trial courts, judges, and juries. Most states have 3 kinds of courts. The lowest state courts are called state trial courts. Most cases begin there. Each state is divided into a judicial district, and each district has its own trial court. Ohio has 88 state courts. Rhode Island is much smaller. They only have 4. Each trial court has a judge and a jury. The judge's job is to make sure the trial is fair. They're basically like being the referee of the trial. They make sure that the lawyers follow the law, and they're supposed to be there to stop injustice from happening. The judge decides what facts can be presented and what can't. So when they bring in evidence to a court case, that evidence has to get cleared by the judge to see if it's relevant to the case. And sometimes the judge can say, no, you can't bring that evidence in. So the judge decides what facts can be presented. They decide what questions can be asked. If you've ever watched Law and Order and you hear one of the lawyers say, I object, the judge gets to decide if the lawyer can keep asking those type of questions or if they get thrown out. In addition, the judge will usually decide the sentencing. So the jury typically decides the guilt, but the judge is going to decide the punishment once the crime or once the verdict has been given. So people on a jury usually live within the judicial district where the crime happened. A new jury is picked for each case, and it's usually 12 people, sometimes with alternates in it. So, if you were facing charges in Youngstown, your jury would most likely come from Youngstown. I would not be on your jury since I live all the way in Pennsylvania. It's going to be people from your area. Now, there are some exceptions. If you are looking at someone who's like a celebrity that's super well known, they might bring the jury in from other places to try to find people who aren't super familiar with that famous person, so they're not swayed by their celebrity status. During the trial, all the facts of a case are presented. The jury listens to the witnesses and the lawyers from both sides. In a criminal case, the jury's going to decide who's guilty and who is innocent. If you're innocent, that means, you beat the case. The charges aren't sticking. If you're guilty, that means the jury decided you did commit the crime. In a civil case, they're not deciding guilt or innocence. They're deciding who is right and who is wrong. And in a civil case, you're not usually facing jail time. Your punishment for a civil case is most likely going to be a fine or some amount of money or service you have to give to the person who was or who you wronged in that case. So let's go back to that example about the guy who you paid to renovate your kitchen. If you take him to court and you win the civil case, he's most likely going to have to give you your money back, and there could be some additional fines or consequences for him. In most cases, all people on the jury must agree. Now, in almost every case, the jury's verdict has to be 12-0. It can't be 11-1. It's got to be unanimous decision. There are some rare exceptions, but almost every single case, you're looking for a 12-0 decision to say somebody is guilty. If they can't come to a decision and the jury is deadlocked, usually the judge will declare a mistrial, which means that trial is thrown out and you get a whole brand new trial if they decide to press the charges against you again. So the next highest court is the State Court of Appeals. And the State Court of Appeals, their job is to look at cases that people feel were unfair. So if you have a trial and you feel like your lawyer really wasn't working to help you beat your case, and let's say you find out that your lawyer was actually drunk during the trial, you could ask for an appeal. And what's going to happen is the higher courts, the State Court of Appeals, are going to look at the case and they're going to decide if your trial was fair or not if you were guilty or innocent. And if they decide your trial was fair, the verdict is upheld. That means whatever the previous court decided stays. So if you were guilty and it's upheld, you are still guilty. If the judge decides your trial was not fair because your lawyer was drunk and not doing his job, the verdict can be overturned. That does not mean you're innocent. But what that does mean is the door is open for a brand new trial. Okay, so the highest court in the state is called the State Supreme Court. Now, this is not the same as the United States Supreme Court. This is the highest court for one state, not the United States. So in most states, the highest court is the State Supreme Court, and they can review cases from lower courts within that state. They have the final decision on state laws and state constitution. The only courts higher than them are going to be the Federal Court of Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court. A state Supreme Court is usually made up of several judges called justices, and they have similar responsibilities to the United States Supreme Court that we've talked about, but they don't have as wide of a jurisdiction. They're contained within one state specifically. Most cases never reach the state Supreme Court. Their cases are going to be handled by lower courts, and they usually only get there by direct appeal. Even if, you ask the state Supreme Court to look at your case, they do not have to look at it. They have to accept your appeal to review your case. Most state Supreme Courts review at least 100 cases a year, and they usually are only taking cases where there's been controversy or disagreement or lots of back and forth. Cases appealed to the state Supreme Court are handled just like any other appeal case. It's not a brand new trial. What they're doing is they are going over the previous cases to see if something was done incorrectly, if a wrong decision was made, or if the trial was not fair. So it checks to see if all the laws and rules were followed. And they can do the same thing as the other courts of appeals. They can ask for, they can do the same thing as the other courts of appeals. They can make a decision on whether the verdict is upheld or overturned. In this little chart right here, it shows you how the court system works. So if you get charged with a crime, you're going to most likely start at state court or the state trial court, and then through an appeal, you go to the state court of appeals, then the state Supreme Court, and then you can go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, guys. So that's most of the chapter. We're probably going to take a look at the last 2 pages tomorrow. So what I need you guys to do is go into Google Classroom and open up chapter 13, lesson 1.